Hello guys, today we're gonna talk about Islam and the occult. So, I have to inform my audience that I became a Muslim, and a lot of people will be like, why the fuck did you become a Muslim? It's a shitty religion, you work with jinns, it's forbidden in Islam. Okay, I'm gonna explain everything. So yes, I converted to Islam, I'm gonna explain why. And I also gonna explain how it's gonna influence the channel. So don't worry guys, I still work with a gen and I'm gonna explain why. And also I'm gonna explain how I see all of that, like how I see Islam and the occult, relationship between Islam and the occult, relationship between Islam and esotericism, and how it all kind of works together. Now, for reference, I'm gonna just point out a few terms, a few technical philosophical terms here. Okay, so I need to point out that word magic and the occult in the Western intellectual sphere, they don't mean absolutely anything. The meaning of the term is so broad that it basically doesn't say anything. The words magic and the occult involve so many different things, which are fundamentally different from each other. That basically, when you say that you are practicing magic, you say absolutely nothing because magic involves so many different things. Uh, and with so many different things as well, a lot of people don't even understand the difference between magic and mysticism. So, first and foremost, we have to define terms here in order for this video to have any sort of semblance or logical coherence. So we have to first define what is magic, what is occultism in Western intellectual sphere, and then we have to define what it means in the Islamic intellectual sphere. We have to define and discuss the terms. Okay, so we have to first define those two terms of magic and the occult within Western intellectual sphere in order to be able to understand them. So basically, within the Western intellectual sphere, magic and the occult simply means any form of spiritual practice which is not a part of mainstream liberal religion. And it involves many different things. It's an umbrella term. It doesn't mean anything. It is really something which is not well defined. Also, within Western intellectual sphere, there is no distinction between the magical operations which invoke angels and divine names, and magical operations which invoke the jinn and different types of jinn. There is no any distinction. Also, in Western intellectual sphere, there is no clear distinction between magic and mysticism. So, for those who don't know, magic is any spiritual operation which has a name of manifesting something in the physical world, while mystical operation is an operation which aims to connect you to God, to connect you to the source in one way or the other. So, a lot of, Western, even researchers, don't distinguish, even academic researchers between the Western sphere. They don't distinguish between magic and mysticism. And because there is no any kind of distinction, the term magic and the occult doesn't define anything. It's basically a box from which everything and anything can come and be put in and be labeled as something. And what I like about Islam and Islamic tradition is that within Muslim esoteric literature, you have a lot of different terms discussing different forms of magic and mysticism, different forms of using divine energy and hidden energy and spirit and beings, conscious beings we don't see, to affect physical reality as well as have mystical experience. And we're gonna go into a few different terms related to magic and mysticism in the Islamic world, of course. Now, I defined magic and mysticism so we know what we are talking about, and we know what's the difference, because a lot of people are not schooled in logic and they don't define the terms at all. And as a consequence of that, nobody knows what is discussed ever. So, we're gonna talk about one topic which is universally forbidden within the Islamic doctrine, and we're gonna say why. There are three things which are universally forbidden within the Islamic doctrine. One thing which is universally forbidden within the Islamic doctrine is basically shirk. Now, shirk basically means venerating or worshipping multiple gods besides Allah. Now, we have to define Allah first, because the concept of Allah in Islam is really misunderstood. Okay, even by some theologians in the modern times. Now, in order to keep this video going and not be ridiculous, I have to say that I didn't study Islamic jurisprudence and I am not the authority on the subject. I am speaking from my own personal experience, and my views and opinions will change as my education and experience change. And so we have to define Allah first if we want to define what associating partners with Allah means, what shirk or venerating multiple gods mean. So in order for us to basically keep talking, we have to define Allah. So Allah is a source of all creation. It's a concept identical to the Brahman in Hinduism, or to Tao in Taoism, or to God in Christianity in its more transcendental form. It's all talking about the same thing. So what Allah is Allah is source of all creation. It's not any form of a limited conscious being you can interact with. It's a source of all creation, the source of all things. So basically, what is shirk is basically thinking that there are multiple divine beings which created everything. Like you have pagan myths where Ra created this, and Osiris created this, and Hecate created this. There is no such a thing in Islam. In Islam, there is only one universal source of consciousness which created everything. And you worship only that one source of consciousness, only Allah. Allah is only being worthy of worship. Now we have to define worship. What worship means? Worship basically means submitting oneself to something in order to achieve divine union, and praising something with adoration as divine. That is worship. And also every worship involves prostration. So basically you are not allowed to worship anything else but the source. And the Allah is basically a description of that source. Now, in Quran, a lot of the time, Allah is spoken of in relatively anthropomorphic terms. He is described as angry, as wise, as having hands, or having legs, or having head, or having a throne. Well, those verses should be interpreted metaphorically, because obviously Allah is source of all consciousness and existence. Therefore, he doesn't need a chair and he doesn't need hands or legs. He is beyond that. So, in that sense, basically, I needed to clarify this, because a lot of people have a weird understanding of the Islamic religion, which does not align with the adequate theological sources. And so, especially in the modern esoteric community, Allah is basically described as some kind of anthropomorphic consciousness which prevents occultists from engaging in their spiritual practices, regardless of are those practices allowed in Islam or not. Which is clearly not what the older theological schools teach. Such an understanding, which I commented on, anthropomorphic understanding of Allah, which sees him as some form of anthropomorphic being with hands and legs and stuff, is really prominent in the modern times by certain religious groups within Muslim community I'm not going to name. But the depiction of Allah, the description of Allah as a source of all consciousness, which is basically literally called the light of lights, the supreme light, the supreme consciousness, is basically the original description. Now, I spent a lot of the time describing Allah in this video because basically that is a really important concept in Muslim spiritual practices, magical or otherwise. Because every time you are uttering divine names or you are repeating surahs from the Quran in a particular way, or you are conjuring certain angels or certain jinns, you are basically using divine names in the surahs, and in that way you are asking for the permission from the source. And every Islamic ritual of magic or mysticism has divine names in it, right? And the surahs from the Quran in it. And the reasoning is, if Allah, or the source of all creation, do not want us to do this, the ritual will not work, right? So because ritual works, it is basically allowed, unless you use it for means which are explicitly banned. And so, let me give you an example. So let's say you are using divine names to conjure an angel, right? You are using names of Allah to conjure an angel. If source of all creation / Allah doesn't want you to summon the angel will not show up, right? If he doesn't want you to summon a jinn, the jinn will not show up. You pronouncing divine names is basically energizing your soul and asking God for permission. That's like basis of every form of Islamic occultism. Every form of Islamic occultism universally works with divine names and the surahs from the Quran. Now, basically, there are different types of magic or using spiritual rituals to manifest earthly goals. And there are basically 3 categories of those rituals. One is actually 4 categories, right? So I have to basically state that in every aspect of Islamic magic, divine names are used in one way or the other. There is no aspect of Islamic magic which is without divine names. And so there is Nuraniyat. Nuraniyat is basically a translation of the word Nuraniyat would be the light workings, the workings of the light. So the entire point of the Nuraniyat is to basically teach you how to conjure angels for your own benefit, right? It deals with angelic forces, spiritual and physical benefit, of course. Now, work with angels is mostly focused on spiritual benefit. Then you have Ruhaniyat. Ruhaniyat basically means spiritual work, and it's more neutral in nature. It involves planetary magic, planetary energies of plants and minerals, how they work together. It conjures basically jinns who are neutral, and it conjures them for non-baneful purposes. It also involves conjuration of a special type of intelligences which are kinda jinnic, known as Kodam, which is basically celestial jinns associated with certain verses in the Quran and certain letters in the Quran. And the Rohaniyat also involves working with the energy of the letters. Now, that's a different topic entirely. So, if I want to be more precise, working with the letters of the Arabic alphabet is part of the Arabic magic in general. But it is mostly studied as its own thing within Ruhaniyat. You know, people who work with the angels, people who do Nuraniyat, as far as I read that literature, don't work with individual letters that much. The theory is that every letter of the Arabic alphabet has its own energy. And basically, by chanting the letters, you generate certain energies which can help you manifest things. And there's like an entire table of correspondences of angels corresponding to the letters and jinn corresponding to the letters. It's really interesting. I never looked into it deeply, but it is what it is. Then you have planetary magic, working with the energy of the planets. And then you have basically sihr, right? And sihr is basically something which is explicitly forbidden. So sihr is like a forbidden spiritual work, forbidden spiritual practice. It involves worshipping of the jinn as gods. It involves desecrating holy relics and books. It involves petitioning jinn to do immoral things such as harming people for no reason, raping people, stealing people. It also involves, really controversially, and a lot of people will not like what I'm saying, it involves any attempt to divine the future as something which is predestined. So basically, concept of 100% predestined future is something which is forbidden within the Islamic doctrine, because we had free will. And any form of determinism is opposed to free will, and then any form of moral responsibility doesn't make sense, because if everything is predetermined, you are not morally responsible for anything you do. Therefore, divining predetermined future is forbidden. It is not permissible. And the reason why it is not permissible is because you have free will and the future isn't predetermined. What you are doing when you are doing divination is you are exposing yourself usually to the random jinnic entities who tell you the version of the future they prefer, or the version of the future which is their estimate. And so doing any form of divination or asking about future as if it is predetermined is forbidden. Divination is explicitly forbidden. And astrology is forbidden if you are trying to use it as a means to determine some kind of predetermined future. Obviously, planets and stars have influence on us. Studying those influences energetically and otherwise is not banned. A lot of Muslim philosophers, Sufi mystics, talked about how planets influence us. Many of them are not mainstream anymore, but there is a really good and powerful amount of literature on that topic, you know. And I need to admit that in my life I experienced a lot of astrology, predeterminism, bullshit sham, and I completely understand the Islamic ban on superstitious aspects of astrology, which are really kind of funny. And obviously, as I said, binding people or raping people with magic is forbidden. That's self-explanatory. Stealing from people is forbidden. Worshipping jinn as God is forbidden. We defined worship too. So basically, within the Islamic doctrine, especially more esoterically oriented Sufi circles, you are allowed to work with angels and jinn as long as you don't worship them. We defined worship. And as long as you don't use them for nefarious and selfish purposes which harm other human beings for your personal benefit without any empathy or consideration. Uh, Muslim daily prayers are fundamental part of my practice, and I'm gonna talk about how the pagan gods, so-called gods, how they fit into all of this. Well, pagan gods are simply jinn, people falsely mistook as gods, and you know, many of them never explicitly asked to be worshipped, and many of them were mistaken for gods by humans who saw a really powerful etheric race of conscious beings we know as the jinn, and because jinn have certain powers we don't, they started venerating them as gods and assuming that they are divine and assuming that they created the world and assuming that they are equal to the source, which is forbidden in Islam and it's bullshit. But if you summon them without worshipping them, then it's okay. You know, a lot of famous Sufi Muslim mystics did it, obviously for purposes which help other human beings. Um, I also have to basically admit that I don't do painful magic anymore, and I don't do love spells. I consider it immoral, and I don't engage in it. I also avoid work with Iblis because he usually leads people down the painful magic path. So I avoid him because I don't want to do that kind of thing. And I don't recommend people working with this entity or entities which are too much associated with him. Now, I am not saying that Iblis doesn't have some information which could be practically useful, but summoning him is dangerous and it's not worth it, especially if you do it really intensely. Those who follow this channel know that due to some really heavy operations with Iblis last year and the year before, especially the year before, because I didn't work with Iblis last year. You know, last year I was basically converting to Islam, but year before last, I did some really heavy work with Iblis, and I almost died, and that was basically one of the reasons why I stopped venerating those Jinns gods, and I started questioning my experiences. I started looking for the sources which describe my experiences as they actually are, instead of relying on the left-hand path sources which are full of confirmation bias. They just quote each other and none of them really aligned with my personal experience. My take on everything is that the most important and basic thing every single mystic and magical practitioner has to possess is you have to possess a connection to Allah, a connection to the source. And we're gonna discuss some methods which I used in my personal experience of connecting to the source. So one of the methods I use is obviously 5 Muslim daily prayers. But before I start my daily prayers, I kind of relax and focus on energy coming from above into the top of my head. I breathe really slowly until I go into that meditative state. And then as I pray and do my prostrations to God, to the source, I am charged with a bunch of energy. I consider Muslim prayer to be a really beneficial practice. But because a lot of my audiences are not Muslim, by the way, I advise people to start practicing the more esoteric aspects of Islam if they want. But I will also lay other methods of charging with the energy of the source, which is present within Muslim esotericism, but is not necessarily a part of formal religious obligations. So you can basically have your connection with the source through those different methods without necessarily officially becoming a Muslim if you really don't want to do that. Because I know that a lot of people who watch this channel are really uncomfortable with Islam because of the fundamentalist a really aggressive branch which recently in the last 150 years became really popular. For the sake of historic research, I will say, for those who are willing to study Islamic history, they will definitely find out what I found out. But basically, Taliban and one more Islamic group, which I am not going to name, they are 150 years old. Islam before that was a esoteric spiritual doctrine, esoteric spiritual tradition, which obviously has its own legal laws. Some of them are really strict, but it was a religion rich in mysticism and magic. It was a religion rich in people who created a set of spiritual methodologies for spiritual experience, which are really diverse, and almost everyone can find something within the mystical aspects of the Islamic religion. It is really open-minded and really beautiful and poetic, absolutely impressive. But if you don't want to pray and officially become a Muslim, fine. There are aspects of Muslim spiritual practice you can also use to recharge yourself. Um, so another thing you can use is you can use the divine names, a list of the 99 divine names. You simply raise the sacred space, you choose the divine name of Allah you like, and then you basically chant the name of Allah while visualizing the energy coming from above into your aura. If you have problem visualizing energy, just visualize light coming into your aura. If you don't want to chant any divine names because you are uncomfortable with it, you can just visualize light coming into your aura and focus on that. All three methodologies I listed, prayers, visualizing light and focusing on it, and chanting divine names of Allah, is something which is practiced within certain Sufi traditions, and all of that is basically a part of the same tradition. Also, when you see astral light on the astral plane, you are basically seeing Allah's energy. One of the titles of Allah is Nur al Nur, the light of lights. So Allah is basically astral light, in a way. So for those who really have an issue with any form of formal prayer and you want to connect with Allah, you want to connect with the source, you can just visualize energy coming, light coming in the top of your head until you start radiating light. That's also one of the methods. Or you can chant divine names, or you can pray 5 times a day. I personally do everything listed, and I do it really intensely, and I dedicate a lot of my time to that. I go to the mosque daily, whenever I can, because praying in a mosque, if you pray after a really spiritual person, it actually builds up energy, really heavy resonance, a lot of astral light there, a lot of energy. It kind of gives you a really strong, peaceful feeling. And basically, that is everything I wanted to say for today. I gave you like a short introduction into Islamic esotericism and why do I think magic, mysticism, and Islam are compatible. I am not sheikh in Islamic jurisprudence, so I am not authority on the subject, but I'm here to state my opinion on this channel and inform you about the changes in my life. So that's it, guys. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this, and if you want to book me for some service or consultation, you can check information in the description in this video. Thank you.